What's going on? Welcome to the Matt Bernier Show here on DRFTV, live.drf.com, livestream.com, the Daily Racing Forms Twitter handle. That would be at DRF Inside Post, as well as the Daily Racing Forms Facebook page. My name is Matt Bernier. You can follow me on Twitter at Bernier_Matt. Today is Friday, February the 9th, 2018, as is going to be the case going forward, really, this time of year. This show is going to be predominantly focused on 3-year-olds. If you listen to this thing podcast, YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, video.drf.com. We will quickly touch on the lone grade one of the weekend. That is the Gulfstream Park Turf Handicap. But really, again, kind of this time of year, what does everybody want to talk about? What is everybody thinking about? 3-year-olds. You had some breaking news not too long ago that Montauk is now off the Derby Trail. He has to have a little bit of a throat procedure. The connections looked at it and said, you know what? We were already kind of on a tight schedule anyways. Let's take some time, make sure that he's good to go, and we'll have some sort of a campaign later on. So he is off the Derby Trail. If you had a future, sorry, no dice. These horses, though, we saw 3 serious preps last weekend, and I think we're going to see possibly 2. I know 1 for certain, but possibly 2 legitimate Derby preps this weekend. Let's first go kind of in retrospect, and we're not going to go back and look at it the way that we did on the recap show, which is up on YouTube and video.drf.com. You can find that, the Matt Bernier Show, the recap edition. It's up every Tuesday. But we're going to kind of look at it from what do I think as far as handicapping-wise. First things first, let's go back and actually look at a few of the races. The Holy Bull was the big one of the 3 last weekend. And you know what? You had a just completely blowout performance from Audible. Here's the stretch run.
Inside, turns away the challenger, Free Drop Billy, and he now has 3 on the rest of the field. Inside the final furlong, no confrontation at all. Audible kicks away. It's Audible and jockey Javier Castellano to win the Holy Bull with style. They won it by 5. Free Drop Billy well clear for second, ahead of his barn buddy Tiz Mischief third. Fourth.
Now, obviously, visually very, very impressive. Free Drop Billy, there was a country mile between him and third, so I think each of those top 2 are very, very good. Again, the interesting thing about Audible is, you know, it was kind of an out of the blue, out of nowhere performance. He looked very good up in New York when he was running at Aqueduct, but it's an entirely different ballgame going 2 turns against the best 3-year-olds that they have down in South Florida. So we'll see ultimately where he goes on and where Free Drop Billy goes, and even some of the also runs with Tiz Mischief in there as well. As far as New York is concerned, I thought going into the weekend that possibly the best 3-year-old that Godolphin had running was not Enticed, who ultimately was the favorite down in the Holy Bull. Thought it might be Avery Island up here in New York when he came back. This was his first start since the Remsen. This is the stretch run of the Withers.
They fire in pursuit now second. Marconi on the outside finding his best stride. There's an 1/8 of a mile to go. Avery Island is called on to finish the job. He leads it by 2. Marconi and Firenze Fire both firing, but Avery Island maintains a comfortable margin with a 16th to go. Firenze Fire trying so hard in second. Avery Island is simply too good, and he wins the Withers by just over 2 lengths. Firenze Fire second.
He's going to need to improve at some point from a speed figure standpoint, but just visually, he looks like the kind of horse that could be a legitimate Derby threat. Distance doesn't look like it's going to be a problem for him. Obviously, the pedigree is there. You've got Bernardini, AP Indy, I believe. So you've got some good things, though, all around to talk about with him. The question now becomes, when is he going to catch up to some of his contemporaries? Because you have a horse like Audible that earns a 99 buyer, and then you have a horse like Avery Island that earns the 87 buyer, and all of a sudden you kind of scratch your head and go, well, he's not there yet, but all things considered, he looks good, and that was his first start again since the Remsen. So you kind of look at that and think that there is going to be scope for improvement, and he's going to improve at some point. Now, if I'm thinking that that race has come back a little bit on the slower side, it's not slow, but it's slower than what we saw in the Holy Bull and some of the other preps thus far in 2018, then the Bob Lewis is certainly on the slow side, because this was a race going into it. It was essentially a non-winners of one, other than Lambeau. He figured to be controlling speed. He was controlling speed. Here's the stretch run.
Timbers capitulating. Ayakara continues to pick up. He's on the inside getting into third. Peace is a long way back fourth. Past the 8th pole comes Lumbo beneath Flavion Pratt. He shows them a clean pair of heels. Lumbo and the Lewis about 4 lengths in front of Ayakara, who is continuing to find the line encouragingly, but he won't catch Lumbo. Lumbo beats Ayakara, Dark Vader, Regulate, and Peace.
Now that race came back very, very on the slow side, because just a number of things. Again, maybe those horses just aren't that good. Just call a spade a spade. And usually when you get a horse that's allowed to get out there and dictate his own terms, that's when you're going to get the best performance of his career. His trainer, Mike Pender, said afterward, you know, about the 16th pole, control. He was rubber-legged. He had jello legs. So you do wonder how far he wants to go, and that ultimately becomes an indictment on the rest of the horses running behind him. The reason that we quickly do a recap is just kind of to look and see where we are as far as the 3-year-olds are concerned and where we could be possibly going, because this weekend, again, there's one prep that is certainly a Kentucky Derby prep, but there's another one that very easily could be, and if history is any indication, it has shown in the past to be a very, very important race. Let's start off with the one that we all kind of think there's a good one in there, and his name is Catholic Boy in the Sam F. Davis. Catholic Boy, remember, the reason we talk a little bit about the withers with Avery Island tried to no avail last year in the Remsen. This is the stretch run of the impressive effort from Catholic Boy.
Come off the turn and enter the stretch. And here is Catholic Boy now to take over the lead. Catholic Boy in front as they pass the 3/16 pole. Catholic Boy with a 3-length lead. Then Avery Island and Vouch and Tap Rap Strike and Alcatam. But it's Catholic Boy, and he may have grown up some today. Catholic Boy wins the Remsen under Manny Franco. Avery Island was second, and Vouch finished third.
He just looks like a horse that could be a Derby kind of horse. And I know it sounds silly to just say that without any kind of explanation, but if you do it long enough and you look at these 3-year-olds and you've seen enough history-wise, you know what a Derby horse looks like, and you know what other horses look like, nice horses. That, to me, looks like a horse that 1.25 miles is going to be right up his alley. Now, whether or not he's ready to go off of this kind of layoff, that remains to be seen. We'll find out tomorrow afternoon in the Sam F. Davis. But the big thing is, you saw already that Avery Island has come back at a run well. We'll see Vouch, and again, we'll talk about that race more in depth in a little bit. Catholic Boy looks like the kind of horse that could be something and a force to be reckoned with going forward, with the likes of the McKinseys and the Instilled Regards and the Mourinhos, and now horses like Avery Island, and who knows, possibly a horse like Axman. Now, Axman is going to be running in the San Vicente tomorrow, and the big thing is, the reason I say history would suggest that the San Vicente could be a nice stepping stone, we have seen in recent years, I think of Nyquist off the top of my head, we've seen that the San Vicente can ultimately produce horses that are forces to be reckoned with on the trail and the road to the Kentucky Derby. This is the maiden score from Axman.
Axman coasting into the lane, opens up 4 lengths. Lombo is still second, well clear of the rest. Optic getting into third, and Morana picks up ground along the inside. Alternate Rhythm is next, but Axman has given his rivals the chop. Axman, an absolutely dominant debut from a most promising specimen. Axman 8 lengths over Morana.
You couldn't ask for a more impressive score than what you got from Axman there, and you heard Michael Rona say nothing but glowing things about him, and I think it's hard to find any real knocks against him. The question now becomes, first time going against winners, is this really what he wants to do? Is he ultimately going to want to go longer? I don't know. I think maybe there's a scenario where he is a sprinter and he's going to be a nice one-turn horse. But the point being, if he does what he looks like he's capable of doing tomorrow afternoon, and if it looks like Catholic Boy goes out and does what he's capable of doing tomorrow afternoon, this 3-year-old group thus far, I know it's really, really early. It's what, the second weekend in February. A lot of things can happen between now and the first Saturday in May. But at this point last year, no one was taking the division, by the scruff of the neck and saying, this is mine. No one's doing that right now either, but the difference is the quality seems to be here this year compared to here last year. I think this is a really, really strong group, and tomorrow's races are going to go a long way into kind of molding and shaping what we think going forward as far as who's boss in this division. Let's dive into a little bit of the handicapping. The Sam F. Davis is the first race that we'll talk about. This is the field, and again, if you're new to this program, if you've never watched it before, on the far right side, it is not a morning line, it is my value line, what I think is proper value and fair value on each one of these runners. It's a short field, and there was no coincidence that it's a short field, and you get Catholic Boy coming back in his return for Jonathan Thomas in post-position order. The number 1 Navy Armed Guard, 49-1. The number 2 Flame Away, 9-1. The number 3 Vino Rosso, 5-1. Septimius Severus, the number 4 horse, 19-1. Hollywood Star for Dale Roman, 6-1. The number 6 is Catholic Boy. He is short on the morning line. I made him 9-5. I don't think you get anything close to 9-5 come post time. I think he's closer to even money. And the number 7 is Vouch for Arnaud Delacour, 5-1 on my value line. I look at this race and say it's very clearly Catholic Boy's to lose. But the question is he going to be ready to go? Because at the end of the day, this is not the goal. The Sam F. Davis is not what the connections have in mind. They've got Derby aspirations. They've got hopes and dreams of bigger and better. This is nothing more than a starting off point. The question becomes, is sort of the starting off point for this horse, is he still going to be just simply better and far superior to the rest of the horses in this race? I look at this race and say, I think this is a major potential race. not necessarily what we're going to see tomorrow. If all of a sudden you get a buyer speed figure that's an 85 tomorrow, I'm not going to immediately think that this race is no good, because I think there's much more potential in this race than maybe necessarily right now. We're going to see from a horse like Axman, who we'll talk about the San Vicente momentarily. You're going to see with Axman, he's going to run something big. Whether or not it's big enough, one, to win, and two, does he want to go 2 turns, we'll find out. But my point is, the Sam F. Davis to me feels like a race that going forward, long term, you could be seeing horses that as they continue to progress and continue to take steps forward with experience and maturation, then maybe you're going to see their best. Maybe we don't get it tomorrow, but down the road, maybe they turn into the best of the lot. Now, as far as the pick and the play is concerned, I think Catholic Boy is strictly the horse to beat, so I'm going to include him in my play. But the pick for me is Vino Rosso. Vino Rosso is a horse, and you'll be able to watch on Out of the Gate. We will talk about this in depth. That's going to follow this show, as it always does. Vino Rosso is the kind of horse that he reminds me a little bit of Taprit. Taprit, again, last year's Belmont Stakes winner. He started off here as far as graded stakes are concerned. He ran in the Sam F. Davis. He ran well, but didn't get the job done. He comes back in the Tampa Bay Derby and takes a giant step forward. And that sort of propels him to that nice 3-year-old campaign that he had, ultimately culminating with one of the classics. I think that's going to be a very similar scenario with Vino Rosso. I don't know if he's good enough to win. Right now on paper, he's not nearly fast enough to win. But that most recent run at Tampa Bay Downs, that non-winner's a one other than. He was 1-20. He's supposed to go out there and put the boots to the field. He wins, but maybe it's not the flashy, spectacular effort that a lot of people had hoped it would be. I look at it and say his ears are up. He pops to his left lead at the end. Johnny V has to get into him a little bit. I don't know what he got out of it from a fitness standpoint, but I do wonder, first time going 2 turns, is this just a horse that it's going to take a little while for him to figure things out? He may not be good enough to get the job done tomorrow. And again, I've pegged odds of 5-1 on him for fair value. But I'm more interested in playing an exacta box. Again, the denomination, make whatever you will of it if you want to make more or less, whatever it is. But I do think Catholic Boy is strictly the horse to beat. But I'm most interested in Vino Rosso as far as a long-term prospect. And I shouldn't say most interested. That's not a good way of explaining it. I think Catholic Boy is the most fascinating horse in the race. But I do think Vino Rosso has a very, very high sort of ceiling. Where he is right now, who knows? Maybe it's going to take some time for him to get there. But I do think Vino Rosso is a horse to keep an eye on. For better or for worse, however he runs tomorrow in the Sam F. Davis, he's going to be my pick. We move on to the grade 1 of the weekend. That's going to be the Gulfstream Park Turf Handicap. Let's take a look at that field. And the only reason I placed it here is because I want to split up 3-year-old races. This is the field. It's not a giant field. Again, I feel like that's a common theme for these races this weekend. You have a field of 8. I think most people are going to look at Heart to Heart and say he is just simply the best horse in the race. And how could you possibly peg 3.5-1 on him at the odds of 7-2? I look at it and say, I don't know if a mile and an eighth is his friend. But again, neither here nor there. We'll dive into that. Post position order, the number 1, Heart to Heart, 7-2. The number 2, One Go All Go, 32-1. The number 3, Kuralov, 10-1. The number 4, High Happy, now with Todd Pletcher, 6-1. The number 5, Money Multiplier, 5-1. The number 6 is March, 10-1. The number 7 is Revved Up, 10-1. And the number 8 is Channel Maker, 5-1. Channel Maker is going to be making his first start against older horses. Heart to Heart, we know Heart to Heart on his best day, what he's capable of doing. His main thing is speed. He's going to probably bottom out the field and say, come and catch me if you can. I think that's all well and good. The most recent run, just draw a line through that. He got out of the gate poorly, and that's not indicative of how he wants to run. He wants to be allowed to go, and he was a little bit keen in behind runners. You break from the inside, you're going to go right to the top. The question now becomes, can he get 9 furlongs? I know he's won at the distance before, but I think at this point in his career, he's a stone-cold miler. And to me, he's going to be an underlay no matter what. Again, I don't think I'm going to get the 7-2 odds that I've pegged on him. I think he's probably going to be closer to the 2-1, 9-5 range, and that to me is an underlay. I'm interested in a horse that has some more, let's say, scope for improvement. I think as a 3-year-old, he did some good things, and hopefully turning 4, first time against older horses, 9 furlongs. Hopefully it all comes together for my pick in here, and that is Channel Maker. I think Channel Maker is a really, really talented runner. You're looking at the Hollywood Derby right now. You see him in the pink silks down to the inside. He's going to come through, and okay, he's not good enough to run down Motown, but Motown is a good horse. I mean, we're talking about a legitimate grade 1 caliber animal. I think this is a good effort, all things considered, and I feel like going forward, maybe 10 furlongs is going to be a little bit better for him, but in this spot, I think he's going to offer some value. I don't think he's going to be anything too short. I pegged him at 5-1. He's going to be my pick in here, and I'll also make a $10 win wager on Channel Maker. I do think that this race, there's a scenario where Heart to Heart just and goes gate to wire. That's fine. I'm not going to be disappointed if that happens, because you know what? That's the name of the game. Sometimes you're right, sometimes you're wrong. I do think Channel Maker, though, when I look at the rest of this field, I kind of know what everyone is. I think Channel Maker has that opportunity to take a little bit of a step forward. And if he ups his game, he's already running buyers in the high 90s. If he can crack that 100 threshold, I think he has a big, big chance to win tomorrow. The Grade 1 Gulfstream Park Turf Handicap. Channel Maker's the pick for me. $10 win bet on him is the play. We go on to the third and final race that we'll talk about here on the Matt Bernier Show. This is going to be a condensed version of this entire thing. That is the San Vicente. We'll go out there, and I've already touched on it. This is the field. Axman is the headliner. There's no denying that he is the horse to beat in here. I've made him 7-5. I think he's going to be odds on. I think he could be off in that 2-5 range when it's all said and done. Mr. Jägermeister coming in from Canterbury, very, very fast horse, could make Axman's life miserable. 49-1. Nero for Bob Baffert, the other Bob Baffert. I think he's a nice horse, but he's a little bit quirky. He doesn't like to be hit with the stick, and that's going to be a problem if you get into some sort of a pitched battle. I made him 16-1. All Out Blitz for Simon Callahan, 5-2. Number 5 is Kintaka. I'm not entirely sure how we're pronouncing it. 8-1. I think he's a nice horse. Chris's Rocket Cat on the far outside for Bejarano and Baltus, 6-1. Axman, no question. We already saw that maiden score. He looked brilliant. The 97 buyer, far and away the fastest thing in this field. And you wonder if second-time starter, if he takes that sort of just natural step from start 1 to start 2, then yeah, I mean, he's going to be very, very difficult. And if he runs a 100, he's going to win, plain and simple. But I do think the sort of post positions add a little bit of a wrinkle to this entire thing. Breaking from post 1 with Mr. Jägermeister drawn just to your outside. You know Mr. Jägermeister's game. Big, big speed. I think there's a scenario where those two hook up, and maybe the 7/8 of a mile ultimately is the undoing of Axman. Not from a talent standpoint, but maybe circumstances get him. And I also think there's a really nice horse in this race called All Out Blitz. We're going to take a look at his most recent run. Guess what? He ran into a good horse called McKinsey. I'm sure you've heard of him. He's one of the leading 3-year-olds in the entire country. Now, this was going 2 turns. This was at a mile. I think All Out Blitz continued on. I actually, going into the race, I was concerned that maybe he didn't want to go that far. I think he ran just fine, and I don't think the distance got him beat. I think he just got beat by a superior talent. Now, though, the turn back in distance, I think, is going to do a world of good. I think from a dynamic standpoint, if you have those 2 inside horses hook up and go and throw it down, get hot and heavy, I think All Out Blitz is the one that sits just off. You know that he's going to have the bottom on the turn back. You know that from a speed figure standpoint, he's not that far behind a horse like Axman. I think all things line up for All Out Blitz, and that's why, for the pick and the play, he is my pick. I think All Out Blitz has a big, big chance to win this race. I think he's going to work out a beautiful trip in this spot. I think the turn back is going to do wonders, and again, if those 2 on the inside hook up, and there are other good runners in here, I think the entire field really is quite good. I think the 5 and the 6, Kintaka as well as Chris's Rocket Cat, I think they're both very, very talented, but I do think just that recency, the turn back in the class relief, I think it all adds up for All Out Blitz. He is my pick in here, and I also make a $20 win wager on All Out Blitz. I've made him 5-2 on the value line. That is going to wrap this abbreviated version of the Matt Bernier Show up. If you've been watching live.drf.com, livestream.com, the Daily Racing Forum's Twitter handle, that would be at DRF Inside Post, as well as the Daily Racing Forum's Facebook page. Thank you for doing so, which most of you check this thing out podcast version. You see down there at the bottom of the screen, YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, video.drf. The big thing here is this is going to probably, in all likelihood, unless there's a big week and I happen to be back, this will probably be the last show that I'm doing here in this studio. There will not be a preview show next week because I will be in the midst of a move. The next time we do this preview show, it's going to look considerably different. It's going to be all the same stuff, all the same nuts and bolts, and the boys in the back, Craig and AJ, they're going to do the phenomenal job they always do. They make all this stuff work. It's just going to take a different look, and maybe it'll be a little bit of an adjustment for the viewers, and it'll certainly be a bit of an adjustment for me trying to figure things out and figure out how this entire thing is going to go. So just bear with me when all that is going on. No preview show next week. We will have the recap show coming up on Tuesday. That will be here in studio, and then following that, everything's going to have a little bit of a different look to it. So just bear with me. That's all I'm asking, and I appreciate everyone's support, and hopefully everything goes off without a hitch. You've already listened to the DRF Players podcast. You've listened to this show. As we always do on Friday, we lead into the latest edition of Out of the Gate. Whatever you're playing, however you're playing, wherever you're playing, best of luck this weekend. Best of luck to the folks out in Las Vegas in the NHC. We'll chat again on Tuesday to recap all the big stakes action from this weekend. Good luck. Here's Out of the Gate.